Did you know that leading lines are just one of the types of lines that can be used to improve the composition of an image? No? Then stay here with me. Hey everyone, Lucas here and welcome to another video. Today's video is the first of the Elements of Composition series, where I will be covering in details the main elements that can be used to improve the composition of your shots. In today's video, we'll be talking about lines. I'll cover the basic types of lines and how to use them as composition tools. After that, I will dive into a specific type of line that's very useful to direct the viewer's eyes into the frame. Yep, I am talking about leading lines. So let's get started. Lines are one of the most basic elements of composition, and perhaps the most common is to associate them with roads, buildings, and other man-made things. But when I say lines here, I'm not talking about lines as we have seen in geometry. The meaning of lines here is significantly broader. In fact, anything from roads to the ridge line of a mountain, the shape of sand dunes, and countless other things can be seen and used as lines. We can have vertical and horizontal lines, we can have diagonals and also curves. They can be as obvious as the vertical lines of a building or more subtle, such as the vertical lines created by a waterfall, for instance. But how can we use lines as an element of composition? There are many ways we can use lines. For example, we can use lines to help isolate portions of the image, to create depth, to create contrast and tension. We can also use lines to create paths to guide the viewer's eyes around the frame. Lines are very good too to convey the message behind the image. For example, vertical lines can look stiff and rigid. It also can bring a sense of balance, stability, and even strength, depending on the shot. They can also convey the notion of height and scale, mainly when the lines are compared with other elements in the picture, and usually it causes the viewer's eyes to move upwards and downwards following the vertical line. Vertical lines are very noticeable in architecture photos and landscape photography. Moving on, we have horizontal lines. Horizontal lines can also create a sense of stability and balance in the same way as the vertical lines do. They can also be used to add depth on the picture and also to create divisions within the frame, such as the horizontal line dividing the skies and the sea or the skies and the earth. Finally, horizontal lines can also be used to induce the sense of motion to the shot. Diagonals, on the other hand, can create a sense of unbalance and tension on the shot and can be used to highlight the idea of motion in the picture. A very good way to achieve this effect is by tilting the shot so the horizontal or vertical lines become diagonals. This is particularly useful when shooting cars, motorcycles, and other fast-moving objects. Every time that we're including straight lines, such as vertical walls of buildings or the horizontal line, be sure to have them leveled on the picture because having slanted lines there will break completely the sense of stability. If the tilt is something you're really going for, just be sure to really tilt these lines as to act more like diagonals. The tilt should be obvious enough to show to the viewer that it was intentional rather than accidental. Last but not least, curved lines can bring a notion of calmness, relaxation, and peace. Like the diagonals, they also promote a sense of motion, but in a gentler way, as these lines can also span all across the picture. Curves are a good way to invite the viewer to explore the whole picture. A good example of the use of curves is when you have a river or a road that winds around the frame. All of these types of lines can be promoted to what I think is the most important type of lines that we can use when composing shots. These are the leading lines. These special type of lines help us on leading the viewer's eyes towards the most important area of the picture, it being a person, a building, or a specific point in the image. In fact, nothing can be simpler than having lines guiding the viewer's attention straight to the subject of the photo. And that's why I consider leading lines as the most important type of lines in terms of composition. One of the most effective ways to use leading lines is by having converging lines, which basically are diagonals that meet somewhere in the frame. If you place your subject where the lines meet, you will have two or more diagonals working as leading lines. Another way to use leading lines is to position your subject somewhere in the frame in a way that breaks horizontal lines or diagonals. By doing so, we force the viewer to stop following that particular line and look at the subject. And the best of it is that we can use as many leading lines as we can find within our frame. I've chosen 3 images to illustrate the use of lines in photography. I want to remark though that the lines were not the only element of composition used in the shots. There are others such as the use of contrast, framing and cropping that were also used to create the image. So let's see the first example. On this shot of the famous Morant's Curve in Banff National Park, we have the motion of the train highlighted by using a 2-second exposure. To help improve the sense of movement of the train, we also have the curves of the railroad and this diagonal here, formed by the train itself. On this shot, the first obvious line we have is the line that separates the lake from the trees and the background. After this one, we have this line that starts from the right and heads towards this area, and the reflection of this line does the same. If we follow any of these lines, we will then fall into this horizontal line here. Then we would hit this tree, and from the tree there are many other paths from the frame, such as this one here, for example. On this picture, we have several lines converging to the center of the frame, which is the main focal point of the shot. We have the horizontal line that divides the lake from the mountains, and it also works as leading lines here and here. On both sides, we have the mountains also going down towards the center of the frame. Finally, the reflections of the mountains work as leading lines as well, as we can see here and here. Lines and leading lines are just one tool that can be used to bring attention to where we want in the frame. But there will be occasions where we will not find any leading lines. In these situations, we will need to work with other elements of composition that we'll be exploring in this series of videos. That's everything I have for today, guys. Next video I will talk about another element of composition, the viewpoint. So, thanks for watching, and I will see you on the next video.